Ever wondered what it takes to make kosher wines at wineries not typically making kosher wine? Well, that's something we're going to explore on this episode of The Jewish Drinking Show, bringing L'chaim to life. Welcome, everybody, to the newest episode of The Jewish Drinking Show. I'm your host, Rabbi Drew Kaplan, and I'm very excited to welcome first-time guest of the show, Jay Buchsbaum. Jay, welcome.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Drew.
My absolute pleasure. So for those less familiar with Jay, he has worked for over 20 years for Royal Wine Corporation, which I think people might be more familiar with them as Kedem, where he presently serves as both the executive vice president of marketing as well as the director of wine education. He holds a WSET level 2 certificate and is currently enrolled to level 3. Is that still current, by the way?
Yes.
Still current. Okay.
I haven't taken the test yet, which I'm shivering about, right? Frankly, it's a really tough course.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say you're surrounded by wine.
Yeah.
And then he also worked for the San Francisco Wine Exchange early in his career. And most recently, Jay launched the web series Swirl with his co-host Gabe Geller, who's a previous guest of the show on Kosher.com, that focuses on wine reviews, viewer questions, and general wine talk. Over the years, Jay has worked with viticulturalists and winemakers to advance the level of wine quality from the vineyard to the bottle. Now I'm really curious. I just briefly checked out the Swirl. So there's over 50 episodes you've done with Gabe?
Something like that.
And what's the frequency of publication of those?
About a half a dozen times a year.
Okay. And when did you start that? How did you start that? And they're only 10, 15 minutes? They're only 10, 15 minute clips, right?
Yeah, they're about, I don't know, they're about 15, 20 minutes, yeah. But Kosher.com, the largest kosher website on planet Earth, approached and said, this is an important part of Jewish tradition and Jewish life and Jewish social, stuff and Jewish theology, etc. So we need a thing on wine. So why don't you do it? And we said, yeah, great.
Absolutely. Actually, I'm really curious. It's not in your bio, but how did you get interested in wine? Because no one just lands at Royal. So how did you get
great story?
Yeah.
I was the first graduating class of Touro College.
Oh, wow.
And I was an accountant, a fiscal records analyst for the city of New York. My first job was accounting.
Wow.
And I did that for 2 years and I was bored out of my brain. I mean, I was so totally bored because I'm the kind of guy that can't sit still. And especially if you're working in accounting, and especially if you're working in accounting for a city agency, a public agency, you're expected to be very, structured and sit in your place and and anyway. So a friend of mine after 2 years said, I got this job. I'm making a very long story very short.
Yeah.
Even though it sounds long. Nevertheless, I got this job opportunity for you working as a salesman for a small wine company on the Lower East Side. And I interviewed. They said, boy, you're really great. We'd like to, 2 days later, we'd like to have hired you, but we didn't even offer you the job because you were making double the salary that we were offering. And I said, are you kidding me? I'll take it tomorrow because it meant that I could travel. They would pay for the traveling. And I said, nice. Whoa, I'm with, you had me at hello, as they say, that old saying. Anyway, so they hired both of us. They hired that guy that they already made the offer to, and they hired me. And they said, whoever's standing in 6 months is the guy who's going to keep the job. Well, anyway, 3 months later, that guy was gone. And I stayed there for about 2 years. Then I went to work for this non-kosher company, which is in my bio.
Yeah.
And all those years that I was working in this non-kosher company, a couple of years, not a lot, I kept going to David Herzog and kept saying, David, what do you got? Because I sold this non-kosher wine, but I couldn't drink it because I'm observant.
Yeah.
So, and I'd say, David, you gotta up your game. David Herzog, who is now our chairman, who was then the CEO, his son Morty now has taken over. Anyway, so David said, Jay, why don't you just come and help us do it, And so eventually I did. And I've been here, it says 20 plus years. The only reason it says that is because I don't want to give away the real secret, which is 30 plus years.
Oh, why not lead with that? 30 plus. That's more experience.
It just shows you, it's showing my age a bit. So
if I can ask, which year did you join Royal?
1980. I'm sorry. Yeah, 1980. 1990, excuse me.
1990. Okay. So, so you've seen a lot going on in the kosher world.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Which brings us to our topic. Now, we have previously featured on the show talking about Royal and Kedem. We had Gabe Geller. I was really fascinated by a couple of products, I think, that are really widely well-known, big sellers, both Jeunesse as well as the Bartonura Moscato d'Asti, which I think the things that blew me away. I mean, I think a lot of people are familiar with these products, but Jeunesse, what shocked me was, okay, fine. Usually when I think about kosher products in general, or in wine in particular, is the kosher world follows the general world. But Jeunesse really led the way, right? Even for the general wine world, right?
And actually, it's ironic in some ways, because
Mm-hmm.
even though we were the first ones to come out with a wine of that category, a semi-sweet, serious wine, we are not the leaders. Even though we were the first to market, we're not the leaders in the market. There's a really famous wine called Apothic, which is made by Gallo, and there's many others.
But you were the trailblazer.
We were the trailblazer, but not the leaders. On the other hand, Moscato, Bartonura Moscato, was also pretty much the leader of making a Moscato from Italy. We were in the leadership. We weren't quite as far ahead of everybody as we were with the Jeunesse, but we are the leader today. Still, we're the biggest selling Moscato on planet Earth, Italian upscale Moscato on planet Earth. Yeah,
that's so amazing. I mean, I was back when I lived in California, fascinated to see not only advertisements, but also billboards for Moscato d'Asti, because it's not common to see, in popular media advertising for kosher wine. So that was fantastic, fascinating to see the blue bottle out there.
Well, it's a wonderful thing that the hip hop crowd and the hip hop crowd, as well as, millennials and whatever, Gen X, everybody's into this stuff. We guesstimate that, and you've already talked to Gabe about it, so I don't want to, bore your listenership again, but we guesstimate that somewhere between 70 and 90% is not a kosher consumer.
Wow, that's impressive. And you don't really have that with other products of Royal, right? It's really, that's impressive. Okay. So, now that we're talking Bartonura Moscato d'Asti, I'm really fascinating. Were you there when that started in Italy, doing those runs?
I was.
What's the story behind that? And this is really getting us into our topic of, because I know Royal does a lot of different.
One of our salespeople, tasted this wine, tasted this type of wine. It wasn't Bartonura. It was under the Rashi label, actually. Tasted this type of wine, and he thought, boy, this will be great for the Jewish kosher consumer, because they like it a little bit sweet, but it's really fresh and lively. So we made it, and that's really where it started. And then about 20 years ago, Drake and I think it's 50 Cent, or I can't remember which rapper, just by chance had it on his video. And, boom, the window was open, and boy, the Herzogs and the rest of our team decided, if that window's open, we're going through it. So, we did big time.
It's a good marketing wave to ride. So, but take us back. Was one of the first for doing runs at wineries in Europe? No. So can we go back? Like, what started this all? How did that all take place?
More important to talk. To since you did touch on that with Gabe, much more important, as we talked about prior to the show. In 1986, and I was there for this. This was really wonderful. In 1986, actually in 1988 or 89, the Rothschild family released their first kosher wine. And it was from Baron Edmund Benjamin Rothschild. It was from a really beautiful chateau in Medoc called Chateau Clark, which is owned by the Rothschilds. But it's the only wine from that winery that is under the Rothschild name. Chateau Clark's wines are under Chateau Clark, and several other brands that they actually produce at that winery, secondary labels, etc. But and Pierre Medovnik, to his credit, a Frenchman from Guy, who loved wines, approached them. They made the wine, and now we have Grand Crus and Premier Crus and Grand Crus. But not,
So can I just
sure.
jump in? Not all of our listeners, including myself, are deeply familiar with all these different name conventions with wines. Can you just briefly walk through these crus with us? What are those crus?
In 1924, I can't remember. I'll have to look it up. But there was a period when the French government decided to start classifying wines. So giving them,
like a control.
But more than that, even giving them certain levels of quality, okay, legally. Okay,
you know what it reminds me of in America? It reminds me of the late 19th century, the Bottled and Bond Act, to create controls around bourbon and whiskeys, because there was all sorts of shenanigans going on in the late 19th century in our country. So this is just a couple decades later in a different country, a different product.
I believe it was 1911, but we could look into that again. But yes, so the Rothschild family owned a bunch of wineries, and they wanted that imprimatur, that signature, that stamp of approval. And the government actually tasted the wines, and only the best and finest, and they made, several levels, Grand Cru, Premier Cru, secondary and third growths.
So these are by tastes. They're not necessarily age statements.
No, they're not age statements at all.
Oh, they're just
these are the pedigree over time. So, except for one area in France, the cru can change in that one area, but all the other crus are fixed. So the winery has proven over a long period of time that they qualify for the cru level, stamp of approval. And now we have, oh my gosh, we have a bunch of Premier Crus and Premier Crus under kosher certification. Now, what the interesting thing about that from a kosher perspective is virtually all of them don't need the kosher certification to sell their wines. They're all pretty much pre-sold.
Really? They're just that high quality?
Yeah, they're so high quality. In fact, you hear about this from Sotheby's, etc. You hear that, somebody sold their wine collection for, $14 million, and there was a 1943, Lafite, or a 1928 Mouton, and so on and so forth. But even the secondary crus, such as Giscourt and Cantenac Brown and Las Combes, and I'm mentioning the ones that are now being made under kosher certification. Yeah. So all of these are, Léoville and Ponte Canet, which is a second cru. They're all pre-sold under the French system of how they sell their wines.
I will say the Ponte Canet, I had a little bit of it at this year's kosher food and wine experience, and that was really phenomenal, like mind-blowingly phenomenal.
Right. So they don't need us. Why are they doing it? That's really the question.
How does this? Are they reaching out to you, or are you reaching out to them? How do these interactions take place?
Always reaching out to them. Almost
because they don't really need the kosher consumer crowd, right?
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. But when Menachem Israelievich, who is now, learned the winemaking and kosher making process at the chateaus from Pierre. He was Pierre's youngest mashgiach. He was a mashgiach on wine before he could drink it at 17. Wow. In France, of course, the age is 18, but even before he could drink it, and certainly even in the United States, he couldn't even drink it until he was 21. But he is such a wonderful, charming, frum, good, honest, straight, great guy that he approaches these French wineries, tells them about how he's done it at Giscourt or Rothschild or etc. And they go, really? maybe we should. And you mean Jewish people, these kosher people really want this good stuff? He goes, yeah, are you kidding me? And they want your stuff, Mr. Giscourt, and they want your stuff, Mr. Lescombs, but they can't have it because you're not certified. But I'll take care of that for you, and we'll do everything. You don't have to do a thing, Just give us access. It's not true. They have to do a lot because they have to give up a lot of control. With wine, unlike food, and I have this discussion all the time, unlike food, where it's ingredients based, this is all handling. These winemakers really love to handle their own wine, and now they have to give up all that handling to this group of payist, white-shirted, black-suited, frumies. But they are so wonderful, and they're so, they've got such great work ethic that they're not the kind of mashgichim that sit back and go, okay, do this, do that. They really are hands-on. They love their wine. They love working with these people. I interviewed the Mankal, the general manager, the head honcho at Lescombs, and I said to him, and we were there obviously for the whole kosher thing and to ask him about the kosher and how he got into it, blah blah blah. And he said, this year the kosher Lescombs is better than ours, better than the non-kosher. And I said, dear sir, you're on camera. He said, yes. So I said, do you mind if I actually publish that? He said, no problem. It's the truth. So the point is that, the lots that we take, because these lots have to be separated even by barrel, because they can't be mixed in with the non-kosher.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always turn out that way. It turned out that way that year. But my point really is that, it's just like, they want to reach the Japanese market, and they want to reach the Feinschmeckers in India, and now, Menachem Israelievich has shown them that there's a really fine wine drinker in the kosher consumer, and a group of them, and so they want to reach them too. That's what it's all about.
So is this initially driven or led by kashrut agencies or Royal? Like how does that dance work?
By Royal,
it is by Royal.
The wine people. Kashrut agencies in general, frankly, they have no business in looking to make anything kosher. It's not true. Actually, I was just which is really wonderful. I was just at a seminar that the OU ran for two days for all their mashgichim, and they, most kashrut agencies are there. Let's just put it this way: the OU is the only kashrut agency that has zero financial interest because it's nonprofit.
Wow, that's
all
impressive.
The other kashrut agencies are, even though they may be, there's somebody who runs it who makes a living out of that. The OU, if they lose the kashrus or they gain a kashrus, sure, there's less money for the agency, but they're an agency that serves the greater community, and their whole tafkid, their whole purpose. They announced this and I happened to be there this year because they honored the Herzogs. Their whole purpose is to bring more kosher foods to the kosher consumer so that they have more choices, and so that those people who would ordinarily maybe not, who are Jewish and maybe not be careful about having kosher cheese or kosher snacks or kosher ice cream or whatever it is, now they have an easy alternative. So that's their tafkid. Their tafkid is to really just make sure that there's more stuff out there. So, I could see where they may be going after kosher, but mostly it's consumers that call up the OU or call up the producer and say, can you get this stuff kosher? Or, call up the distributor that's selling it. I've heard about your, dipsy doodles, and can you get it kosher? And so, but in our case, we're in business. Yeah. And we know that the kosher consumer wants a better Bordeaux or a better Sauterne or a better Italian Chianti. And so we will go out there and try to find it for them.
Hey there, hope you're enjoying this episode so far featuring Jay Buchsbaum. I want to give you a sneak peek as we begin to kick off our mini-series on a toast to Israel at 75.
Tel Aviv summer is hot and humid.
Yeah.
So when you get very high humidity. So sometimes the humidity is so high that means that you're going to lose more alcohol because the water doesn't have anywhere to evaporate.
Yeah.
So you're going to lose alcohol and not water. And then the casks are spreading and the liquid goes deeper inside the staves and extract a lot of colors and taste.
Oh.
And then in the winter, Tel Aviv is dry. Even if it's raining, the air is dry and it's a little bit cooler. So then casks are a little bit shrinking, the liquid goes out, and then because it's dry, you lose more water, so ABV will go up. ABV will
water
go,
in the winter and alcohol in the summer.
ABV goes up and down all year long. Casks are working. We lose 11% angel share, which is a lot.
Yeah.
In Scotland, you talk about 1.5 to 2% a year. It's 11 a year. We have very thirsty Jewish angels here.
I hope you enjoy that sneak peek on really Israel's very first ever whiskey distillery. All right, now back into the show with Jay. When did Royal first start going into Europe to use the wineries?
In the 1970s.
Oh, so even before. Oh, wow. So it's really gone back.
70s, there's a very famous story about Reb Yonah, who founded the Kedem part of the winery here in America. Herzog has been going back since 1848 in Czechoslovakia, but here in America he founded it. And in the 50s, actually in 52, I think. But in 1970, I believe it was 73, he went to France and made 3 Bordeaux's, Chateau Le Pin, Lepin, but it's pronounced Le Pin. It's pronounced Le Pin, even though it sounds like Le Pin, amongst 2 others. And, the New York Times Frank Pryle of the New York Times wrote about first ever real wines from, Kosher. Because in those days, it was the wine so thick you can cut it with a knife. I mean, you needed the thicker, the richer, the sweeter the Concord was, the better, Along came Reb Yonah and said, wait a minute, that's not how we drank it in Europe. We drank good dry wines. And so he brought in these, I think it was 700 or 1,000 cases of 3 different types, 300 cases of each. And I remember David Herzog tells a story all the time. He went into Zacky's, which is like the premier, fanciest wine shop in New York, in the New York metro area. And the guy threw him out. And he said, who's going to pay $10 for kosher wine? Kosher wine was $1.99 or $2.99.
Wow.
And okay. So, and the next day, of course, Frank Pryle in the New York Times came out with this article. And 3 days later, the wines were sold out. And Zacky's called up David Herzog frantically saying, okay, send me 10 cases of each. And David said, sorry, Charlie, they're gone. That's how it all began.
That's great. And then, so during your time, through 3+ decades at Royal, what trends have you seen? I mean, there's definitely, I know that there's a lot that you have that you source from Europe and in other countries. And I know that just from going to KFWE, there are 30 French wineries represented. So how has that been? How much outreach have you done? How much, I guess, also customer feedback have you received about these wines, in addition to obviously the Martinor and Moscato, but from various countries?
Simple. The trend is very simple. Jews are like everybody else. They're just like everybody else. They just want better. They want more. They want more variety. They want it cleaner, better, tastier, fresher, more wonderful, more age-worthy. Whatever they want is more of everything, And what I find, and I talk about this in a marketing sense all the time, the greatest increase comes not from new customers in terms of consumption, but from the elasticity of the existing customer. So if you're a Bartonura drinker, somewhere along the line, you're going to say, well, Bartonura is really great, but I heard about this Chenin Blanc, which is a little bit less sweet, or I heard about this Jeunesse, which is a little bit more serious. They'll drink that, and then they'll they'll from the Chenin Blanc, they'll go to a Chardonnay, and from a Chardonnay, they'll go to a Sauvignon Blanc, which is even drier. And then from Sauvignon Blanc, they'll go to a light, fresh, fruity Cabernet. And then from a light, fresh, fruity Cabernet, they'll go to a more serious Pinot Noir, et cetera, until, when they never even thought of spending more than $15 for a bottle of wine, 3 years down the road, $30 is where they're buying every day, So,
Nice.
And it's the same thing with meat and with cheeses and with oils, and with vinegars. And I mean, as long as Baruch Hashem, thank the good Lord, he continues to give us largesse in terms of our spendable income. People want better. They want better cars. They want better cigars. They want better watches. They want better, And I think that, in some ways, I don't know, what we'd like to believe is that I'll never forget Nathan Herzog's father. He should live and be well for 120 plus. Once did a national sales meeting, and everybody in every category spoke about what they do. So the winemaker spoke about making wine, and the operations guy spoke about making, how deliveries, and the guy who accounts receivable spoke about how important it is to collect money. And then the Reb Feisch got up there, and he was supposed to talk about the overall picture and how they all fit together. And he said, and you would think that he would talk about that. He didn't. He said, I want everybody to know we are not in the wine business. People looked at him like, what? I thought that's why we're here, Yeah. And he said, no, we are in the bris business. We are in the bar mitzvah business. We are in the bat mitzvah business. We are in the sheva brachas business. We are in the wedding business. We are, and for those who are Gentile and non-Jewish, we are in the wedding business. We're in the anniversary business. We're in the graduation business, and I think, it's more than just wine. It's bringing for everybody, it's bringing, simcha to the table. But if you can raise your spiritual Shabbos meal, if you can raise the level of your enjoyment of your Shabbos Su'uda with a wonderful bottle of wine from Eretz Yisrael or from Napa Valley under Herzog, gosh, that, it's bringing together the plane with the spiritual and really raising the plane.
I wanted to break in really briefly. I'm Rabbi Drew, your host and founder of JewishDrinking.com. Turns out, as of this fall, the IRS has recognized Jewish Drinking as a 501c3 organization. You are always welcome to make donations. If you have any questions how to do so, you can check out the website or even simply email me at drew@jewishdrinking.com. Thank you. Now back into the show. You mentioned how they're happy to, work with you and have the mashgichim work literally hands-on with the grapes. How is there anything else to the process, or is it's all just sort of businessy stuff and you just work it out? I don't really know. That might not be the most well-articulated question, but just anything else interesting about the process, or it's all just sort of normal?
No, I think there is a lot of nuances, perhaps too many to go through here, but I'll give you one or two. In French winemaking, especially for the crus and even their secondary crus, sometimes they'll use new barrels for a period of time, and then they'll use 1-year-old barrels. We're going into a winery for the first time for another 6 months, let's say. Okay. So it won't be all new barrels, and there's a reason for it, because they don't want that aggressive nature of just fresh barrels wooded, But if we're going into a winery for the first time, it's second year and the third year, it works because we'll save our barrels. But if we're going into the winery for the first time, even though it may be exactly the same blend, that first year is going to get only new barrels. Another example. And sometimes this works for us and sometimes this works against us. Wineries harvest grapes when they're perfectly ready. Now, when does harvest take place?
Fall?
Right.
Yeah.
Right during Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, right?
Yeah.
So now it's Saturday morning. First day of, it's on Yom Kippur, let's call it, okay, this year. which is
Yeah.
Shabbos. I don't know if it was this year, but let's call it that year was Yom Kippur, and the grapes are ready. There's no rabbi to call to harvest those grapes. We can't do it. So they got to wait till Sunday. Or
is there a big difference for a day or two?
Yes.
Really?
It
Just
can,
a day or
yes.
two. I can understand a week
For
or a month, but a
exacting
day or two?
wineries, yes,
Really?
for exacting wineries, they want it exactly on the right time. So
Wow.
what do they do to mitigate that? Now, so if we don't get it, because sometimes we can't, right? We don't get it at the right time. You're right. A day or two won't make enormous amounts of difference, but it could make a difference. And these guys that are cru class A, they don't want even this scintilla of a difference, right?
Yeah.
So what do? So they designate for us, for the kosher, the best plots of the vineyards, so that in case it's a day off, at least it's the best plot. So, some years it's a day off, but it's the best plot. So that makes up maybe for that scintilla of difference. So and there's so many other, I can go through 20, 30, 40 different other nuanced differences. So
are the labels largely the same aside from kosher certification?
Exactly the same.
Oh, and then the only difference is the kosher certification?
Right.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting.
And also the corks are certified, are printed differently because of halachic. I went through a fascinating Rabbi Zekbach, fascinating. He wrote, I think at least one, I think they're writing the second or the third, I'm not sure, on yayin. And, what it takes to seal a bottle and how many smachot, how many seals you need in order for it to retain its kosher.
You need like two. It's like in 129 or 130 of Yoredea. There's a whole bunch.
It's two.
Yeah.
But lechatchila, according to Ashkenaz, it could be one.
Yeah.
Nobody holds like that, and we don't use that. Right.
Yeah.
But guess how many? Here's a fun question for the next cocktail party.
Yes.
And I do this a lot at
it could be a wine party. Aren't you supposed to be advertising wine? No,
I do this a lot.
We're pluralistic. We could do cocktails here too. It's fine.
That's right. I do this a lot at cocktail parties. How many? Lately I've been doing it since Rev Zekbach's talk. How many seals are on one of Rabbi Zekbach's premier crus or cru class A wines?
Are we supposed to guess 2+? Is like 3?
So you tell me.
Well, I'm guessing the cork is 1. Whatever the wrapper is number 2. I don't know what a third thing would be, but
okay.
Yeah.
So the answer is, I'm going to do it short because we don't have a lot of time left. But there's 4.
Ooh, yeah. So what are the other 2?
Everybody says the cork. Most answer the cork is 1 and the capsule is 2.
Yeah.
Right? Wrong. The cork.
Is there 1. Like another wax on top of the cork or something?
No, the cork is 1. But on the cork, there's something written. You have to get through that writing. That's 2. Then you have the capsule. That's 3. And then on the capsule, there's another writing.
Oh,
that's 4.
So unbeknownst to the consumer, there's a lot of layers.
Yes. So those are the nuances that are different, perhaps with kosher wine. With the same kosher wine, there's another nuance that perhaps is different with the same kosher wine as there is with the same bottling of a non-kosher, same variety.
Let me ask you a quick question. How many of them are of these products that you source, whether Europe, other countries, how many of them are mavushal and how many of them are not? Just a general percentage.
It's so hard to answer that question because if you're talking about the very high end, only the very high end,
I'm guessing they're not mavushal.
I would say about 10 to 20% maximum are mavushal.
Okay.
Maximum. But if you're talking about the wide range, from let's say $20 to $150, I would say probably 50% or more.
Okay. So all right. So it's a mix.
And if you're talking about the amount of bottles, and let's say the $20 to $150 range, I would say 85% of mavushal. Because the $20 bottle of wine, they're almost all mavushal.
Right.
And that's what the volume is,
Yeah. Well, it's also a lot of us are in the diaspora, and makes things a lot easier when hosting. So
Oh, and the
Yeah.
questions and the
Yes.
complications of mavushal versus non-mavushal versus re'iyah, which is a nuance that very few, but some people hold is an issue of seeing the wine after it's opened or when, et cetera, et cetera. It's a wonderfully complicated, and I mean, that's why I have a job.
Hey there, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I know you might think that Jewish drinking only exists on podcasts, but guess what? It can be so much more. Have you ever wondered how to elevate an experience for your shul, JCC, other organizations, even businesses? I'm more than happy to chat to see how we can bring that to you. You can feel free to reach out to me at drew@jewishdrinking.com. We can see how I can help you bring L'chaims to life. You mentioned there's like dozens of other nuances. Do you mind sharing just even one or two little tidbit nuances?
I gave you the
That was fun. That was great. That was great party trivia.
I gave you the ceiling thing. I gave you the special vineyard sections, which are different. I gave you the barrels, which may be different.
Oh, right, for the first fill.
The barrels, which may be different. Here's another one.
Yes.
Everybody says, and I'm the first one to say it, that there is no difference between kosher and non-kosher wine in terms of the ingredients, right?
But the process is different, or the handling, right?
Right. Just the handling is different. Unlike food, where, if a cracker had gelatin, a fat that wasn't kosher, you'd have to change the ingredients. So it wouldn't be the same as the original cracker, right? In the wine, not that way, because it's exactly the same. Wrong. Sometimes. And that's the nuance that is really and that is that it used to be that all wines were made exactly the same. When I say used to be, I'm talking about 150 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
But over the last 150 years, there's been a lot of additives, preservatives, and ingredients that are used in the processing of making wine that may or may not be kosher. I'll give you two examples.
Yes.
Okay? Gelatin. Gelatin is sometimes used by many wineries, not most, only a small cadre, if you will, of wineries, but gelatin is used as a fining agent. What they do is they take the gelatin, they spread it on the top of a tank, and it sinks to the bottom. It's heavier than the liquid. It sinks to the bottom, and as it goes down, it takes particulates out with it. So it clarifies the wine. It's used as a clarification agent.
Does isinglass do something similar?
Isinglass is like that too, yes.
Okay.
And so these are not, isinglass is not kosher, as far as I've been told, but certainly gelatin is not kosher, right? And even though it doesn't remain in the wine, you're not allowed to use it to make kosher wine. Okay, that's one example. All right. I'll give you one other example of an ingredient, and there's about 20 of these kinds of ingredients. I'll give you two other examples.
Okay, that's great.
One other example is wines are often acid balanced. So, for example, when it's harvested, the acidity level may not be as high. They harvested at that time because the sugar was right, and they couldn't get the acid to the level they wanted it. And they didn't want the sugar to grow more because it would be too high in alcohol, it would be too sweet, whatever. So they took it out. They took the grapes before the acid got to its proper level, okay? Or after it did, or whatever, okay? So now there's not enough acid. So what do? You balance it with acidities that you can use that are kosher for kosher wine. In non-kosher wine, there is an acid called sodium caseinate. Now, what strikes you as interesting about that word?
The casein. So is it dairy?
It's dairy. It comes from a dairy source. And once again, halachically, I always do this disclaimer. You have to ask your local rabbi, but halachically, it might be okay because it's only it's batel b'shishim, and it's only but it may be an etzem davar, maybe a primary source material, etc. But we don't use it in kosher wine at all. If we want to acidify the wines, we either use a kosher acidifying agent or we use higher acid wine to add back into it, balance it out. So, and one more, I'll give you one more example.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah.
One more example. Yeast. 150 years ago, there was no such thing as,
I
wine.
don't think they knew about yeast.
They did. They knew about yeast, but they knew that it was on the grape skins.
Yeah.
However it got fermented, the yeast that was there started fermenting this pus, this juice. Today, they kill the yeast that is naturally there, and then they add a yeast that they know how it operates, how it develops. So there's much more control. You don't have wild, crazy things going on sometimes. And there have been champagnes that were made from yeasts or that used yeast that came from a grain source.
Oh,
now,
interesting.
Would that be a problem?
For Pesach.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So these are nuances that most wineries, almost nobody uses that kind of yeast anymore, but it could happen.
Yeah.
And not only that, but even the wineries that use other controlled yeasts, we don't know where the original source was. So they started growing kosher yeasts probably 60, 70 years ago. And now we know that the yeast that we use is only from a kosher source.
Jay, this has been fascinating, insightful. But before we go, is there anything you would like to promote?
That's a great question. I actually, I have this thing that I think that people should not be listening to what I want to promote. What I urge, I'm not kidding, and I really believe this. I think that, if we're to grow the business, and that's my objective, right? To have people enjoy wine more often, right? It's not that they should be listening to me. Listen to yourself. Spend more time experimenting. When I go into a restaurant, people, the restaurateur will say, well, what do you what would you like? And I would say, I want to try something new. I want to try something interesting. There are two things that I don't like.
Sure.
There's only two things that I don't like in food. One is raw onions and the other is raw celery. Everything else, test me.
All right. So let me ask you, even though you just told us not to listen to you, but what if we were to listen to you? The Swirl series, I want to go back to it because I'm so fascinated. How much can we learn through that series?
What I would urge you to, the thing that I'm going to promote, promote white wines.
Okay.
You speak to people and they're, what's your best cab? What's your best red? What's your best, what?
I'm guilty of this.
We don't drink enough white wines. Great red wines are great. And I love great red wines, but they're great for your steak. They're great for your rich, thick. And on Tuesday night, when you have pizza, you're not having a big, rich red wine, but you could have a wonderful Chenin Blanc or a great Sauvignon and if it's a richer, heavier, pasta and cream sauce, you could have a big, rich Chardonnay, but you're not having a red wine. And we don't, as a community, and by the way, this is true of the kosher and non-kosher consumer, we don't enjoy enough white wines. Enjoy white wines. White wines. Listen to me.
Well, especially in the warmer weather, it might be
rosés. We don't. Rosés become a hot topic now, so that's better. But we should try more white wines.
Great. That's advice I know I need to hear. It's a good push for pluralism.
I have to tell you, we have one of my single favorite white wines is Herzog Russian River Chardonnay.
Nice.
So every time I do these fancy tastings for these fancy moistim, these fancy charities, and all the fine schmeckers come up and they go, "What's your best red?" And I go, I'll give you my best red, but before you do, I want to taste you on this wine." They go, No, I don't like white wine. I don't like white. And I go, just taste it. If you don't like it, that's fine. Taste it, make me happy. And I taste them on this Russian River Chardonnay and go, wow. I could drink this wine. They don't want to admit that they really like it, half the time. I could drink this wine, It's really, if you have a really good, same thing with Goose Bay Sauvignon Blanc. I mean, there's so many delicious white wines. Please, white wines, everybody.
That's good. That is a helpful push for diversity. All right. Well, Jay, this has been great. This has been fascinating. Thank you so much. And l'chaim.
L'chaim.